key area. Should we think about it as a governance, data governance problem in model design, or should it be more on a verification or a compliance angle?
Thanks. Thank you very much, Shyam, for having me, and good morning to everyone, and welcome to this session. I think, okay, let me maybe just start with saying that I'm not an AI or AI safety expert. So whatever I say, take it with a pinch of salt. My work is on biosecurity, and that's the angle I'll come from. I think all of those things, whether it's model evaluation and other things, those are there, and those are very, very important factors, and those are the things that we need to keep in mind. But on top of that, there is also a deep structural change that is happening. For example, in the field of life sciences, historically, whatever risk and risk governance things that we had were very much linked to the physical infrastructure and lab facilities and facility inspection and material transfer control and things like that. But that seems to have changed and seems to be changing very rapidly now, with the kind of AI biodesign tools as well as LLMs that are emerging. So I think Rand also did a study on this, but there are more than probably 1,500 biodesign tools that are out there, and those are totally transforming how life sciences, but in general science is done. Now, what kind of the change that we are seeing is with these capabilities, now it's much easier to engineer proteins, optimize DNA sequences to do things that we want, have better pathogen host modeling, interaction modeling, and things like that. Now, these capabilities are, because of AI, becoming partly decoupled from the physical containment measures which were usually used in the life sciences. So we have a lot of this risk landscape shifting a little bit more upstream to the design side when it comes to at least biological side of things. So yes, data governance things matter. Model evaluation and red teamings are essential, and we should be doing that. But also, it is very important that especially for a country like India, where we have a very, very vibrant scientific ecosystem, but that is also very uneven. Right? How we can use this AI-enabled science, which is rapidly evolving into the existing mechanisms to some extent, but also at the same time develop those capabilities, have more people with the core capabilities in AI biosecurity, or AI chemical security, AI nuclear security, and things like that. So we need to train more people on those things. So integrating, again, going back to the life sciences, so integrating AI evaluation into biosafety system, strengthening the institutional readiness. Some places there are some labs and some institutions have information security labs or information security offices. How we can get them better prepared for these new emerging risks that are coming due to AI. Some places they have biosafety officers or biosecurity officers. How we can enable them better to address the AI risk is what the direction that we need to move towards. And have more adaptive oversight mechanism that is not only based on the limited to this once in a while inspection that happens, but have that goes more with the rapidly evolving things that we are seeing with the AI models coming up. And I think just in terms of paradigm change that we are seeing and that you mentioned, is there need to be more decentralized checks and balances and oversight mechanisms. If there is one authority sitting somewhere in Delhi and trying to do everything, that's not going to work. So that is one of the things that we have to collectively think about. How do we decentralize these kind of oversight systems to some extent? For example, as I was saying, how we can empower the information security or biosecurity offices and create what in the field of disarmament, where I have worked on, called web of prevention. One measure is not enough. It's not sufficient. You need to have a number of measures in place which collectively can help prevent something bad from happening. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very insightful. And I think we've already touched on some areas that that would be follow-up questions. PT, focusing a bit more on open science, where high-risk domains, especially in biological data and AI capabilities, as Suresh was mentioning, how do we preserve the benefits of open science while preventing the destabilizing diffusion of capabilities that we were just discussing about?
Thank you for having me today. So I guess like I would love to be able to give like a binary yes or no answer, right? I think we all want to have that, but unfortunately that's not quite the case. So we need to find a way to balance the openness and also the restrictions as well. So I guess my answer here would be sort of like a tiered access and contextual norms. I think those are really important. And I think RAND Europe has done a really great job at establishing the Global Risk Index on AI-enabled biological tools, and also just generally looking into AI safety in general, where they do this thing where they call the pre-deployment assessment with structured rubrics. And I'm a huge fan of that because I think that when you release like very frontier models and frontier tools, the danger is already out there once released, right? It's really hard to withdraw the danger. But however, prevention, right? Like there's this window before you release where you can do a pre-deployment assessment. So I think I'm a really huge fan of that, and also the same way that I'm a big fan of like KYC, like know your customers. And I guess this principle also pretty much applies where it's like, in the case of biosecurity, right, where we differentially allow the development of medical countermeasures and also the defensive measures that is necessary for the research, but also like don't limit the researchers from actually innovating either. And I guess my point here is that the non-safeguarded access, like private access to credential researchers where necessary for like defensive research is absolutely necessary. And then, like open source tools, it's necessary. Like we can't turn away from being open source. Like any governance structure that conflates open source with danger makes a huge mistakes, because that also is a very critical development point, especially for lower resource settings. So we cannot afford to conflate that altogether. So I guess a very long way to answer this, and then to summarize my answer is that differentiated governance at capability level is always better than blanket restriction at access level.
I think that's a very structured answer, and I think there's a start of a very valid framework level conversation that's already happening there. Geeta, turning to you, thinking more about institutional gaps in enabling some of the solutions that we are discussing here, potential solutions. What are the most immediate gaps that you see in evaluating AI systems, technical capability, regulatory, and coordination, largely from the policy angle that you work in?
Thank you, Shyam. Good morning, everyone. So, on the technical capabilities, right, the most fundamental thing I see is the AI readiness aspect of deployment. So, in general, when we see India stands or ranks third globally, and when we see the Southeast Asian countries, I think Indonesia is around 49, and so there we see the gap, right? So whatever we do from the Western context or in the Indian context can never be catered to the needs, the unique needs of the Southeast Asian countries. And moreover, there is the end user perception, where we see that we have to build a lot of capacity for creating awareness among the end users who are actually going to use the products. And from the policy perspective, I would like to give you certain aspects where we think about the socio-cultural aspects that is relevant to the deployment environments. So in general, the large language models are usually trained on the Western data, and the very recent research work, maybe I'll cover a bit of both tech and policy here. So there is a Southeast Asia related benchmark, safety benchmark, which says that all these leading large language models have failed when they evaluated for more than 20 to 30% of the risk in the biological settings. So, which means that we did not have enough safeguards which will protect people from encountering all these risks. And moreover, so this lets us know that we have to build in more socio-cultural evaluations and assessments which will cater to the harms that is more particular to that particular deployment environment rather than just having a high level evaluation strategies. And this cannot come just from the policy side, right? So we need to bring in all the participatory approach which will bring in the end users, the different stakeholders involved in the using all these AI systems, be it model, right from the requirements definition, right? So when we assess whether we need an AI system or not, generally now there is a perception saying that for whatever we are going to build or the problem that we are going to solve, by default we assume that we need a large language model, which will not cater, which is not even possible to have it deployed in a low resource setting, right? So we need to think about small language models which will enable edge deployments at the low resource settings and also consider all the multicultural and socio-economic diversity that exists in these regions so that your model doesn't hallucinate, is still fair, and also establish some governance and accountability frameworks which will make the developers more accountable. And also because having the developers more accountable will enable them considering more safeguards, right? And also create more awareness about the main fundamental thing is that they will be expected to document whatever testing that has been gone through. And on the policy side, there is one more aspect which is the Indian government also endorses, right? The self-regulation and voluntary commitments on managing and mitigating risk that comes out of all these AI models. So I think we have to have a unified framework which can still be adaptable to different deployment settings. Yeah.
I think we already are getting a diversity of perspectives here, and it's very useful to hear. Moving ahead and thinking about institutionalizing these kind of capabilities in scientific AI context, PT, turning to you, should independent evaluation and red teaming of AI systems from a technical kind of solution perspective for this problem that generate biological outputs, especially thinking biosecurity, given your perspective on this, should it become a norm and part of the global scientific specialist infrastructure? And if so, how would we go about that?
So I guess like a good example to use here is probably we're thinking of like nuclear like weapons, right? Which falls under this organization called the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. Now, from my perspective, I think fissile materials, correct me if I'm wrong, they're very scarce, and they are to a certain degree technically trackable, and they are also more than anything else highly regulated. Whereas biology, on the other hand, is everything but that. It's diffuse, it's dual use by nature, and it's also nearly impossible to trace, and also, most importantly, commercially available, right? And so in the recent study, actually, this was done by this organization called Secure Bio, where they actually tested frontier large language models against expert virologists. And it turns out that ChatGPT o3 actually outperformed expert virologists by 94% at troubleshooting wet lab protocols. So that's a very shocking number, right? And then, I mean, obviously, you mentioned earlier that there's a very concentrated effort that is happening between the US, UK, and China, like the global superpowers, basically. And I guess there's in the recommendation from the RAND Europe that I was, helping out with is that we recommended that governments and also independent researchers do this 6-monthly ritual of monitoring and also assessment of risk on a continuous basis. And we also suggested, obviously, like using AI as an automation tool to increase the efficiency of this risk monitoring system. But I think, to your point, I think stuff like this, stuff like that is non-interactive methodology that doesn't require researchers to actually query directly with the dangerous systems is actually already in and of itself a very meaningful safeguard. But that is not enough. We need we need something that is much larger than that. That is the integration into institutionalizing it. But I would argue that like a 6-monthly ritual, that refresh cadence, for it to be delivered, it's going to require a very significant investment from the government at a multilateral level, right? And so we can't go without any investment at all. So my suggestion would be to actually implement this AI Safety or Security Institute model that we've been applying, where largely it is technically credentialed, it's independent, but also has a very formal relationship with the government. And something that I would caveat from the bio side is that for the institution to have some kind of anchoring around Biological Weapons Convention or the WHO. Because right now that relationship is not quite there yet. And I think back to my point of like pre-deployment assessment, I think that is definitely needed, and then the result has to be shared then across the credential network with tiered confidentiality that rather than being kept as a proprietary to the different state. Yeah.
I think it's kind of a middle-level problem, solving it at the level of multilateral institutions, solving it at the level of developers. It's a middle-level problem. That's an interesting position, PT. Suresh, thinking more about safety measures at large, how can we make sure that they remain rigorous and feasible within research ecosystems that you're quite familiar with, from a biosecurity angle, if you will, but largely also in the larger scientific ecosystem?
Thanks, Shyam. I think first thing that we need to understand is how that ecosystem is, and then see if certain measures will work there or not, right? One of the hallmarks of, let's say, Indian scientific ecosystem is there is a lot of heterogeneity. There are some places which are really extremely well performing, and there are other places who are not well resourced or have all kind of challenges. So understanding how the ecosystem is, what kind of regulation within the institutes that are there, what kind of administrative measures that are there, what kind of safety teams these kind of institutes might have, all of those things are extremely important, right? The governance capacity, compliance culture, and technical expertise varies widely in Indian institutions. And I believe this is true for many other countries in the global south as well. So it's not something very particular to India. We have challenges related to different kind of resources. And even when the resources are there, sometimes it's also problematic to use them efficiently enough. Now, given that context, if we just import safety frameworks that are developed in a well-resourced place in a Western country or any developed countries, I don't know if those would be a very good fit for the kind of system that we have here. So those might become more performative than functional to some extent. Another challenge that also PT mentioned to some extent is that the speed and scale of AI is huge, right? And we need these traditional review mechanisms that institutes have for safety audits and all of those things. We're not going to work. We need something which is far more adaptive and quick. And also this here, what we had traditionally is this periodic paper-based facility-centric kind of measures, and those are very much outdated in the era of AI that we live in. Now, now the question becomes, how do we design proportionate capability-aware safeguards that would be better matched for the challenges that we have? One of the major challenge, as I think a lot of us realize, is that there is limited awareness about AI safety when it comes to scientific issues, even among the scientists. right? So a huge number, a large majority of scientists just don't know what they are putting, let's say in ChatGPT might be harmful, or what they are getting out of biodesign tools could be harmful to some extent. So there is some understanding about the privacy related issues, but safety and security is still a big gap in understanding of even the scientific experts that are there. Now, also regarding AI, I think there needs to be a tiered risk classification. So not everything is highly risky. There are certain biodesign tools, for example, that are trained in virus data. Those we'll put in a higher risk category compared to something which is just working, let's say, on certain animals which are not dangerous. Now, also, the safety measures, as I was mentioning earlier, this should, as the risk has moved a bit upstream, it has come more on the design side. We should also have more safety measures moving upstream. And as PT was mentioning that, certain kind of evaluation that are before launching AI tools are necessary, but also integrating AI evaluation modules into grant review processes, creating cross-trained AI biosafety review panels. So panels specifically for AI biosafety from the bottom-up side, instead of from having them from the top-down approach. Investing more in domestic evaluation capacity, having more AI safety institutes like Geeta's home institute at IIT Madras. So we need a lot more of that. And lastly, I think what we have in the US and UK are a lot of AI safety work is being done there, right? And as I was mentioning, importing that directly might not work. And we, in the global south, are largely the users and importer of this technology. So we have to see from the bottom-up side, where do we put those safety measures? Do we, like, when it comes to import, what kind of when the data is being transferred, is there certain places where we can put those kind of safeguards? Also, how we can use some tech sovereignty measures in this context, right? That tech sovereignty measures are used for a number of things, but AI security is something, AI safety and security is something where those could also be used to some extent. So yeah, I would stop here and then we can discuss.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think a lot of useful thoughts here for us to explore a bit more. I think we've just crossed the mid-mark. And I'm going to use Geeta to kind of like bridge between the next two topics by combining two of your questions. Sorry about that. Just as Suresh just mentioned, will the emerging scientific powers, global south, middle powers, would they be able to shape governance in this context, especially AI-enabled science, or will they continue to inherit the frameworks? And if they were to show leadership, what would that look like in scientific AI and research ecosystems? And you've already been working on some of this, so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing concrete measures that are happening.
Yeah. Sure. So in general, what I think is definitely the emerging powers, right? They are putting on all efforts to bring in all the tools and frameworks that are required for governing these AI systems. And for example, so India's strategy towards all these emerging techs is that they are trying to create sandboxes which are highly essential for deploying or evaluating safety aspects for the models, right? So they do it for healthcare systems, they do it for radiology systems and whatever, right? So these type of tools and frameworks come from Indian settings, will actually help the other underdeveloped countries to learn from the strategies that we use, and then build something of their own, or something which cannot go cross-border can still happen through learning and collaboration, right? So For example, we are going to launch a global South network for AI, trustworthy AI, which will enable all these mechanisms to happen, enable people to develop and deploy AI systems, which will be deployed in the low resource settings. And the other initiative which is going to give a very big leap in evaluating AI safety is coming up with an AI safety commons for the global South. Okay, that is part of the safe and trusted AI pillar. That is one of the pillars in this Impact Summit. And I think in another 1 or 2 years, we'll have safety commons, which will help us evaluate and assess how these AI data models and systems work for different deployment settings. Another important thing is that, as Suresh mentioned about the audit frameworks, so when we come with, when we focus on the kind of risk and audit mechanisms that we have here, we still have it from a organization perspective and not from the end user perspective, right? So at CRI, we have come up with an incident reporting mechanism and a framework that caters to the Indian settings. So it tells you how to operationalize AI incident reporting in the Indian settings, which is completely different from the Western settings. And here we have to get the harms that the people experience in the marginalized communities, which will never be recorded everywhere, right? So how do we enable all these things? So since it is all about all these CERN-based systems, right? Even those things will have certain impacts to the marginalized communities, which may be an indirect impact. But how do they knowing about such things are happening to them, right? So those kinds of gaps we should mitigate by building more awareness, creating more AI literacy to all these people. And the final thoughts about combining all these things is that we have to bring in some kind of collaborative work between the different stakeholders who are involved in developing and deploying these systems. And the governments have already given certain prompt knowledge about how to enable all these things through the techno-legal framework and guidelines that was recently published, and the AI governance guidelines, which was recently published by MeitY. So the Southeast Asian countries can learn from the developing countries like India, and then have a curated or more tailored approach towards their unique needs, right? So that is what I think. So whoever has an opportunity to, or a willingness to have more things that will actually help them use or leverage these technologies can learn from the mistakes as well as the experience that the other countries have, which is now openly available through all these summits. Yeah.
That's very useful, and I'm looking forward to following up on IIT Madras's work in this front as well. Going to Suresh for kind of the last question in this series, really. Should safety measures, evaluations primarily focus, where should the focus be? At the model level, and you talked about upstream quite a bit. Should there be more broader socio-technical readiness measures, misuse considerations? Where do you think it should be?
Thanks, Shyam. So I think performance metrics that are there that tell us that whether a model works or not. Then bias assessment tell that whether it works in an equitable, fair manner or it does not. But neither of them tell us if it is safe to be used within certain context and certain socioeconomic or scientific ecosystem related context, right? And scientific AI, as we know, is not deployed in a vacuum. So it works within the scope of how science ecosystem is there. So that includes things like funding structures, publication incentives, also from the startup side, startup ecosystem and regulatory environments that is there. So a model that is technically robust can still generate certain kind of systemic risk if it is deployed in places without adequate oversights or dual use literacy. And also, very importantly, incident response capacity. So what you see in many countries in the global south, those kind of incidents response mechanisms are not there. So if something bad happens, how do we report it? So those things are missing, and those are very, very important concerns. Now, in the countries like India, where, as I was mentioning, the scientific ecosystem is, while it's scaling rapidly and there is a lot more funding that is slowly coming up now, it is still uneven, and institutional readiness for AI varies significantly. So when we have a well-resourced national lab, it is not the same kind of readiness or capabilities compared to, let's say, in a smaller private college in a tier 2, tier 3 city in India, right? And also, very importantly, how we have to also see it from the context of people doing their own thing, DIY kind of science that happens, and also small-scale commercial activities which are not fully under the oversight mechanism of the government, right? So the policy, considering all of these points, right, the policy evaluation must expand from model-centric assessment to socio-technical assessment, and this would include, evaluating things like how much capability uplift relative to the government capacity that is there. So government has certain capacity to manage or do oversight, but these AI tools, how are they changing that? Incentive structures, very, very important, that shape the model deployment. Also, the diffusion of risk across borders. So it's all of these things don't respect national borders, right? So how it's going to spread if people using VPN or other things, a number of other things that are there. So integration, lastly, the integration with existing biosafety and research security systems, as I had already mentioned. So briefly, performance evaluation is necessary, but governance relevant evaluation must be systemic, and otherwise we risk auditing algorithms while ignoring the institutions that operationalize them, and that is very, very important. How we focus on that institutional level mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you. PT, kind of the last of structured question before we move into a bit more of an open conversation. AI becomes embedded not just in new capacities, but also existing programs like biosurveillance, public health systems, and so there's a mix between emerging kind of scientific knowledge with more legacy, let's call engineering, knowledge as well. So how do we make sure that safety, evaluation, interoperability, all of that exists in this divide without fragmentation happening across the ecosystem? Because you can easily imagine everyone's doing their own AI, safety evaluation and not necessarily talking to each other.
Thank you, Shyam. I think this is a very important question. And it's also a topic that I'm really passionate about as well, which is biosurveillance. To your point, I think countries are already deploying AI-enabled biosurveillance systems that are, either syndromic surveillance, or it could be, genomic sequencing pipelines or outbreak modeling. The countries are already doing that, but they are not building on the sort of like the unified data standards. So they're basically building on like a very incompatible data standards with very different legal regimes across the borders. Like we've seen that in Southeast Asia, we've seen that even like countries like, for example, Singapore to Malaysia, you see different legal regimens on how they monitor like the data and also like the biosurveillance. And so the fragmentation risk is actually not a technical risk, I would argue, because it's not just a technical risk, because we've seen COVID. I feel like if anyone is anybody sane, I think we all were a little bit traumatized by COVID. We've seen how data hoarding and incompatible reporting actually cost lives. And I saw that especially happening across the region in the lower resource settings, like countries like Cambodia, for example. AI systems that are trained on non-representative data obviously are going to perform much worse. And guess what happens? When they perform worse, the region that is most affected is the region that needs the help the most. And because of that, and also that region is also the same region with the least data infrastructure. And so I guess to sort of like answer your question and what I think we need to do, I think there are three things to be addressed here. The first one is obviously the data standards harmonization. Currently, we don't have that. I think we would need not like a global overhead standard that enforces on every country, but more of a federated interpretability that applies frameworks that applies to different countries. So I can think of like HL7 FHIR, which is the Federated Healthcare Interpretability Resources that are attempting to address this very specific issues. It's on like clinical data, but this one would be adapted for public health surveillance. And the second point is the legal safe harbors for basically just kind of like cross-border sharing of data for like public health emergencies that are negotiated beforehand because, and this is important, beforehand, because if you negotiate during an outbreak, people are going to be freaking out. People are going to be like, I'm not going to share my data to you. What are you going to do with that data? So this needs to be done beforehand. And the last point is, and also the most politically challenging point, is actually to have some kind of shared evaluation criteria across the board between different countries that are embedded into the national surveillance systems. And for example, like Singapore data infrastructure environment might not apply to countries with like different climate data or like different demographic data. So this needs to be applied into, the national surveillance systems. And what I notice, I guess like the last message is that what I notice, the AI governance framework often thinks of biosurveillance as like an edge, like a niche edge case. And then people in biosecurity frameworks, like doing biosecurity frameworks, thinks that AI governance is like a tool. And these people don't talk to each other. And that gap right there is where the risk happens. So yeah, we just need to talk to each other more.
That's easier said. Yeah. So I think I'm just about to close with maybe 5 minutes or just under that for audience question. 10-second final thoughts on each of you from the panel. Suresh.
Just wanted to very quickly, we need to also keep in mind that how AI could help solve some of these AI safety challenges, right? How agentic AI could be used, let's say, when people are trying to develop vaccines. CEPI has developed this platform where agentic AI is being used to check if there's someone who is trying to jailbreak or someone who is trying to, misuse the tool that is there. Second very quick point, also with all that what I said, there is still a gap to transfer things from digital to physical, what is called digital to physical barrier. So even if you have everything, you still can't just modify viruses without having a proper physical infrastructure. And there are still some ways to control that. Thank you.
Geeta.
Yeah, I think we should move on transforming from issues to intelligence, like learning from the risk that happens and feeding it back to the model training and other assessment activities to mitigate the risk in real time, right? So that is where we need we need to move towards bringing in more people into evaluations and then making it safer for people to use.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. PT.
I guess I'll make it quick. The point that I want to make here is that, Suresh, to echo his point, I think you're right that we should not shoot ourselves in the foot, especially for developing countries. I think it's really important. And so my message for the last message here is just kind of like, while we are forging ahead in innovation and while we are innovating ahead in whatever domains of scientific domains that we're doing, we need to be conscious of the impact that we have. And I think India AI Impact Summit is one of the really good places to jumpstart that kind of conversations and break the silos. Thank you.
Sure. And thank you, everyone. I'm just going to take probably 1 minute to kind of summarize key points. Evaluation, I see largely a systemic question, safety measure systemic question. I especially like the point on incident response not being already there, and a couple of points on the cross-border solutions and problems. We already have that. Discussion on open science, we talked about how managed access, safeguards, and comparing government capacity to manage that versus letting it out for more DIY-oriented science, which was a good term. I really like that. That's a key area. And for emerging scientific powers, of course, collaboration is key. Tailored approach, that's something that I'm again waiting to see from IIT Madras as well, their contribution on this. And some cross-border work on legal safe harbors, data standard harmonization, PT that you mentioned, really land well from this panel. I'm going to stop my summary right now, and more of this would be kind of put together in a blog at some point in the nearby future. Perhaps we can go for questions first. Yes, please. I think I can give you mine.
Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I really enjoyed this session as a researcher in safety of AI at the University of York. So I focus on psychological harms of AI. And so what I want to ask particularly Geeta is, when it comes to the definition of harms and traditional safety engineering, they're catering more to physical harms. And now we see the whole spectrum of harms expanding beyond that. So I would love to know the work being done by Kerai and you in this area, and in fact enrich my research with it.
Yeah, sure. So when we actually assess harms and impacts, right, we have to do it from the two different perspectives. One is on the functional side, where we assess all these algorithmic risk and other stuffs. From the human-centric perspective, well, like you said, we can keep doing everything from the psychology perspective and other ethics and other stuffs, right? So here at CIRI, we do work on assessing bias, determining whether the model is stereotypical or not, and how do we generate explanations for the high-level scientific models and all. So from the perspective of the psychological things, right, there is this cognitive science or cognitive capabilities of AI models which will actually enhance or degrade the capabilities of humans, right? So those things are, we are trying to do some assessments from the incident perspective, right? So if you go and read the incident reporting framework that we have a taxonomy of risk and harms and also the impacts, right? So from the kinds of harms that we have defined, we have categorized it as physical, psychological, cyber incident based harms, that, and moreover we have all the generic kinds of harms like algorithmic harms, socio-economic harms, the environmental harms and all. So we are trying to come up with a taxonomy that will cater to the different hierarchies that will be applied to these kind of harms and impacts, which will again be model specific, use case specific, and the domain specific aspects. Yeah, so that is where we are trying to work on. And we also have a healthcare based tool, a toolkit which will enable people to actually assess the perceptions of how they treat these models, how they see whether these AI applications are helpful for them or not, and then come up with some capacity building programs for different roles in which they are working on. And this is being done with CMC Vellore Hospital, and we have been assessing the perceptions of healthcare workers and then come up with a training module which will enable them to use AI models or tools more confidently rather than say being resistant or not relying on them for so much of
Probably last quick question. Maybe keep it short, and the responses as well, please. Sorry.
Yeah. Hi. So my question is about like we are discussing all the geographical barriers, right? The modality is geography. When we change the geography, the models tend to perform poorly. Are we concerned about the temporal modality as well, as when we go forward in time, the data is going to change eventually, and that is going to affect modeling? And how do we plan on mitigating such a problem if when it arises? Yeah.
Yeah, so this comes under the model monitoring, the system monitoring approach, where we consider the data drifts, the out of distribution aspects of the data and model. So definitely this is one of the criteria where you assess safety and evaluate the impacts of it.
Anyone else wants to add before we move on? Sure. Yes, I think last question.
Thank you so much for the insightful discussion. Really appreciated the expertise that you're bringing to the topic. And thanks, PT, for bringing up COVID, because my question is about that. As we learned from COVID, biosecurity risk can quickly become a cross-border existential threat. So what would a successful web of prevention and incident response framework look like? And who are you looking up to in this space? Like, who's doing it well in this space?
Okay, I can start. Maybe PT can add. So I think, as I was mentioning, it will have to be a more decentralized, but at the same time integrated to the leadership. So I think there needs to be more empowerment of people who are like biosafety officers in the lab, or who are institutional biosafety committee members, who are people who are working on the ethics and research security side at the institutes. So those are the people who need to be empowered. So there need to be more capacity building of those people, and at the same time, there needs to be a mechanism established so they can report those incidents to the very top, and there is a top leadership sitting in the capitals. They can in some way get a overview or monitor the situation as it is going on at different institutes level. Thanks.
I can add a little bit to that. So in Singapore, we actually have different agencies responsible for this. So we have the National Environmental Agency, and then we have the MOH, obviously the Ministry of Health. And then we also have a different smaller agency like Communicable Disease Agency, and also like a Prepare Agency, where they're responsible for different tasks. But I want you to envision this as almost like the way that Singapore is trying to establish itself. I think it's trying to establish itself almost as a firefighter. So when there's an incident, where there's a crisis, who is actually doing what is very clear, but it's always not always clear across like different countries. For example, in Laos, Vietnam might be looking very different, but I think having a very coordinated response across the different agencies on who is doing what. Like for example, National Environmental Agency is responsible for wastewater surveillance. So monitoring how the sickness is increasing or spiking or not, those are the people, yeah, that you would look up to.
I think that's the last word, right? It all comes down to prevention and preparedness, even in this, much like anything else with bio context. Thank you, everyone, for the question, and thank you to my brilliant panelists, Suresh, Geeta, and PT. This was a very insightful discussion. On the screen is the work from RAND Europe with CLTR, some of what was referred to by PT and the other panelists as well, some aspects of what we were discussing about risk typification. You'd probably get some ideas there as well. And with that, I close. I'm supposed to hand over these mementos to, apparently, including me, so let us do that now. Thank you. If you can take a picture and send it now, I can use it. Thank you. It's going to be recording the entire day. No.